Why, hello.
Hey there. So I realized it's a beautiful autumn day outside. Well, at least in my mind, what an autumn day should be. Overcast with saturated colors on trees.
Yes, it's beautiful out. It is a classic fall day. And I don't remember the leaves ever looking quite this nice before. Our backyard is all golden, which would be nice for that to be the backdrop of the podcast rather than this. But alas, it's 48 degrees outside and wet.
It's fall.
Looking. So
Yeah.
not the place for me to be, or
No.
you to be, I suppose.
No. No.
You're a little tougher on cold than I am.
Barely.
Barely.
Yeah.
You just don't show it as easily as your non-stoic wife.
Well, we've lived here long enough that temperature change, I've wussed out quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, it is nice with the overcast. It does do something to the colors. I know if it continues to be overcast to tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to be depressed, as will almost everyone you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we all get addicted to the sunlight here.
Monday will be interesting if there's no sun.
Yeah,
and
again,
it's overcast.
Keep up. I didn't actually look at the sky to see if it's full of clouds or if it's just like morning clouds with some blue shining in the west.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll see.
We shall see. Yeah. Well, I'm Dale.
I'm Kit.
Welcome to Catholic Hitch. We are a Catholic family seeking heaven and hoping to pick up others along the way.
Small talk. So I had a rather epic occurrence this week. I would say dramatic. Would you maybe say it was? You know what I'm going to talk about, right?
No, do tell. I know what
The
you're going
one
to talk
big
about,
thing-
but I'm trying to
oh.
lead it on here.
So I had a very interesting Thursday morning. Now, one of my jobs is to promote non-drive alone options, and that includes promoting our local transit system, which is the Regional Transportation District, RTD, or as people like to say, reason to drive, when they're feeling extra clever.
Just like Ford and Dodge. Okay,
Right?
which we won't repeat what those mean.
So, yeah, you don't need to repeat what those mean because I don't get the reference, and I'm sure it's bad.
It is.
So I was out at an RTD station talking to riders, which is something that my organization does. We go out, once a month, usually to kind of make ourselves available as transit advocates to answer questions, to receive feedback and criticism. And then just generally, I'm out there saying, thanks for riding RTD, thanks for riding RTD. Because people, I think especially since COVID, are just, they will not engage with another human being.
Well,
So
it's been harder.
yeah,
It's a wound.
It is. There's this socialization thing that people just have not completely recovered. So some people have, and actually I had some really great conversations with a few people, but it's, probably 10% of the folks that I'm seeing out there will actually engage. So I often make huge signs with big old, 5-inch letters so that people can see from very far away, I am not selling Avon, and squatting on RTD property.
You should put that on your sign.
I'm not. I should actually. That'd be funny.
I'm not selling Avon. I'm selling RTD.
It's nice because when someone comes over, I can answer their questions just like I work for RTD, but I don't work for RTD. So if they start to, imply that they've had problems, I can say, I don't work for RTD. I'm here to collect feedback. And people give very honest feedback, and I can therefore be very empathetic because our role as advocates is to make the system better. So anyways, I was out there doing that on Thursday, and my friend was coming up to meet me at the station from the south side of Denver. So she was taking light rail to commuter rail, and she was going to be getting off the train at 9. And she had texted me that she had gotten on her first light rail train. And I was about to reply to her when someone came up and actually asked me a question. And so I set my phone down on the table, and their question had to do with these new validators that are being installed. So I walked over to the validator, which is 20 feet away, to show them. And then, the 5 minutes or so that I'm gone, I return to the table, and my phone is gone as well, which is also my wallet. So my ID and my card payment options and the cash that I had inside, along with my phone, which is my way to connect to everyone on the world, was all vanished. And that's rather devastating. So I'm there and I'm like, someone just stole my phone. So I have a parked train and I have a parked bus. So I go into the train, which is really immediate because I was on the train platform, and I say, hey, someone just stole my phone. It's a pink case. Did anyone see anything? I'm pregnant. Wah, wah, wah. And, I'm feeling rather emotional. And I even try to activate my watch, like find your phone feature, kind of walk the train length. Then I walk over to the bus and I kind of do the same thing minus the find my phone, which winds up playing a role later. So I get on the bus. There's like, I don't know, 12 people on the bus, and I do my wah wah. I'm, pregnant. Someone just stole my phone. It looks like, it's got a pink case. It's everything. Did anyone see anything? And, it's crickets. So I go back to the platform. The bus and the train operate on a schedule, and they depart. And actually the train operator and the conductor for that train knew what was going on, but they had to go. So it happened so quickly, they were kind of in panic mode. And so, the train's gone, and I'm like, I can't just stand out here for another hour or whatever, pretending to do my job when I need to start making a police report and I need to start canceling accounts, So I start packing my table up, and these other two RTD gentlemen, Rocky and Sean, come walking up, and they ask me, like, hey, is something wrong? They just kind of noticed something was wrong with my vibe, is what they kind of described it as. So I, being a hormonal pregnant woman, start kind of tearing up. And I'm like, someone stole my phone. So I'm like, I need to get home and I need to make some phone calls. And they say, hold on, I can call the police. We can call the police right now. So they call it into the local jurisdiction police department. They call it into the RTD police services. And then they start kind of doing this sleuthing of the security camera system. And they're like telling me how like good the security cameras are at the station. And the way that they're describing it makes it sound like kind of the movies or TV plot, like that you just don't actually believe is in existence. Like there's no high res video at an RTD station. Like that's crazy. And, they chat with me, so they kind of get those balls rolling, and we're waiting for the cops to show up. He lets me call you on his phone, and I just did not expect you to actually pick up the phone. So I was very happy that you did, because I was expecting to leave a voicemail message being like, this is your wife on someone else's phone. You won't recognize the number. You need to...
Luckily, I was working. So
I know.
I will normally answer unless it says scam likely at the office, just because it could be somebody on a building committee or priest.
Okay.
Or I don't necessarily have all their numbers because, unless I'm working directly with them, I don't want to have like their cell phone number on speed dial and, and accidentally
Extra creepy or whatever.
Yeah, dial them up. So when you called, it was kind of one of those, well, crap.
Yeah, I ruined your morning.
Well, I went into like Mission Impossible kind of mode. Yeah. Yeah, so I get on immediately, and I had my laptop with me, so I could access your Google accounts through Chrome. And so I'm monitoring things there. I'm calling the credit card companies, canceling your cards, and I am looking at geolocate because we have location sharing, so if anything happens, we know where each other is, luckily. And so I'm watching, and I'm taking snips of your phone as it moves.
Yeah, and so shockingly, it remained on, which is definitely not... That's why I didn't even try on the bus to like trigger the Find My Phone. Because I was like, if someone's stealing a phone, the first thing they're going to do is shut it off. Like, that's what any normal, sane person would do, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of surprised, too, because it does seem like an odd thing to do. But
oh, I have my suspicion about that as the story continues.
Yeah. So, you're doing whatever you're doing, and I'm... trying to track your phone, taking snips. I took over 43 snip images of it as it continued to go. And then I noticed there was a pattern. It was always at a bus stop or a RTD station.
Yeah.
And it didn't just stop in Thornton. It went all the way to Brighton. At one point, I thought it stopped at a house, but I think it just picked up their Wi-Fi
Someone's
signal.
Wi-Fi, yeah.
So I was like looking at Google Streets. I'm like, this might be the person, trying to figure out, where exactly it was. So I call Thornton PD and let them know. And they're like, oh, well, it's in Brighton. That's a different jurisdiction. So you're going to have to call them. So I give them the case number, call Brighton PD. They start a new case file.
Oh.
And it was because it had stopped for like 6 minutes.
Probably at their transfer station up there.
Yes. Yeah, it was at like
in the
a
downtown
retail
area?
Yeah, a little retail area. And so I'm giving them the information and they're like, well, where is it? I'm like, oh, well, it moved again. And they told me, okay, well, we'll assume it's this spot and you can call it. And now we will go ahead and say, if you... Hi, naked boy. Go ask brother to help you because he knows where they are. Hopefully. Or we might be doing a lot of laundry very quickly.
Okay, go ask brother. So, the police show up at the station and...
That's how he asks. We have a small house, so that's how you ask.
Shout.
You just shout. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So anyway, meanwhile, so you're like Mission Impossible.
Yeah, so I'm doing all this. I'm calling Brighton
computer.
PD. I have to call them back again once the phone stops moving. And then I start to realize, wait, it's on a specific bus. So then I call the guy who you borrowed the phone from, and he said you were already gone. And I think by that time you called me on the house phone.
Yeah.
And so then we started connecting, trying to figure out what was going on. And then we started connecting the dots.
Yep. So the police showed up and I gave a police report. The two guys that stopped to help me out, interestingly enough, like they're both, it's a pair, which you always have for a train. You always have to have 2 employees per train. One's the operator, which means the driver, and the other's the conductor, which means the person that's like there as the emergency backup. It's like federal regulation that you have to have 2 official people that are ready to like step in and stop a train.
Right.
Even though there's a ton of protocols that stop the train automatically at certain speeds, or in certain situations. They are there like hanging out with me, and it's these 2 guys, and they are just so nice to me because I'm like repeating like a mantra, like I'm such an idiot, I'm such an idiot, such an idiot. And they're like, no, like you are out here to do a job and like stuff like this. It just happens. Like, people are going to sometimes take advantage, but it's just, it's something that happens. It's not your fault. And it's really nice. And I emphasize that because like there were other people that came by and very well intentioned are like, well, next time you're out here, make sure that you request a maintenance of way worker, and which is like AKA an RTD babysitter. And, they can be here. And, that's a very nice, well-meaning thing to say, but it does start to imply blame, which is not super helpful when you're already blaming yourself for the stupid situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And there was like a couple of those type of comments like, yeah, you just can't trust people anymore.
Yeah, but
the 2 dudes were just there to like make me feel better, and they did.
For context, though, this isn't your first RTD
event.
No. You've been doing this for... 6-7 years at least.
This job.
Just
and
this
before,
job. So 10 years,
more than
probably.
10 years experience.
You've been doing this kind of work where you have been at these events, and never has this happened before.
Yeah.
Ever.
And I'm not super cavalier with my possessions like that, but at the same time, I'm also not paranoid because, people tend to be normal, kind of good people in the world that don't just grab phones and wallets and stuff. So anyway, these guys that happened to stop, like they had every opportunity to kind of like talk down to me and be condescending about the situation, and they never did that. And so I ended up writing a commendation letter to the RTD CEO, and she replied to that email, and they're going to get some recognition internally for what they did. But these two gentlemen, they were there because they were assigned to the spare train. So there's like a spare train that sits at the end of the line as a just in case a train has issues or
Right.
is running behind or whatever, they can like jump into the line and start serving customers. But for the most part, they just kind of hang out at the station. So that wound up being really fortunate for me. And then I learned a little bit more about how that works. And they were both like high bid employees in the union. So they get the sweet gigs like the spare train, which I guess is kind of a sweet gig to have. You just kind of hang out most of the day waiting for the call. And otherwise you're just at the station, you know, you can check on people, make sure things are going okay. So the cop comes and, you know, gets my statement. And then right after the cop comes, my friend arrives, whom I've not been able to communicate with. Mm-hmm. So she walks off the train and is like, and I'm like, my phone was stolen. So like plopped right into the situation. So rather than going to get coffee like we were going to, we come back to the house. And then that's when you and I start coordinating by phone with our house phone.
Yeah.
And she and I have like a visit / me calling, you know, on a business card that you didn't have access to. And then I was about to wipe my phone. And then I was like, but it's still moving. Maybe I shouldn't wipe my phone quite yet.
Right. That's why I hadn't shut it down.
Yeah.
It's because I was trying to figure out where are they going to stop. Because once they stopped, then I would have assumed that was either where they dumped it or where their mode of operation was.
Yeah. And like, so I'm with my friend and we're like, should we just like jump in the van and like try to like track this down? And you're like, no, you shouldn't, because you're pregnant and you're with another woman and you guys just aren't like the right staff for a confrontation in this situation.
Yeah, we don't need that.
So anyway, when it becomes clear, like between you and I following the phone, you know, in the midst of my chit chat with my friend, that it's still on the bus and it's returning to the station. Mm-hmm. And so one thing, you know, we connect the dots. I check the schedule and there's a GPS lag from where the bus is, where it, you know, reporting with the GPS to where it actually is. And I realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss the bus. So we like run out the door. I'm driving a little faster than I like to in neighborhoods. And I pull into the RTD bus loop. Like I drive right in where the buses go, right as the bus is about to pull off. And I honk my horn and I, you know, run over to the bus. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that they have to leave because they have a schedule to maintain. Like this guy will get in trouble if he is overly late. So I don't want to get him in trouble. So I tell the operator, I'm like, did someone turn in a pink phone? And he's like, no. And I'm like, my phone's on this bus. I've been tracking it with GPS. And then I start looking under all the seats, on all the seats. There's 4 passengers on the bus. And they're like, so where were you sitting when you lost it? And I'm like, no, it was stolen. Like, and fortunately, again, kind of almost miraculously, like it was left on. So we would never have known otherwise. And the other miracle is she didn't silence it or, I had it on sound, which I never leave my phone on sound. Almost, it's
really?
Usually on vibrate.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been on sound since this whole ordeal happened.
I guess I'm used to it being on sound when you're at home.
I just got more into the habit of just leaving it on vibrate because I get notifications on my watch. So I'm like, well, I'll see it if it matters.
Oh.
All right, last one to sharpen, Johnny, okay? No more pencil sharpening. That's it.
Good job. I'll go color. Thank you.
Anyway, I start calling my phone on our house phone, and it takes us a while. So the gal that took it, oh, and I didn't even reveal, we knew who took it because they did have high-res video of her taking it off the
You know what she
table.
looks like.
Yeah.
But you don't know who she is.
No, and I didn't see the image, and I'm grateful for that because I don't want to be out at these RTD stations looking at people like, are you that person?
Right.
So I had a description. You know, they sent the images over or the video footage over to the police, so they knew that she boarded that bus, and it was the bus that I went on to make an appeal to the passengers. So when I did that, I kind of made the phone, you know, hot for her to handle because there were people looking around for a pink phone. Thank goodness I have like a stupid, obnoxious pink case. But she just cleared out the cards and cash and she stashed it under the seat, like in a place that would not have been discovered if we weren't calling the phone. It was kind of like between the bolt on the wall beneath the vent
The
bench.
mounting
so
point to the sidewall of the bus.
Yeah, so we got it back. We recovered the phone, and I don't know. It was like kind of epic, and it's nice to get the phone back. And everything else can, there was no other damage done aside from the cash that was taken. She even left. We have a badge for the Adoration Chapel at church. She left that in the wallet, and she left my coffee punch card. And I had remembered that was in there. I'm like, I'm going to have to go over to this coffee place and I'm going to have to beg them to give me my 3 punches for the 3 punches that were on that card. And I would have probably convinced them.
Well, how much is a pound of coffee?
It's like $11.
So it's $33 worth of value, and you were
well,
so
yeah,
close
because it's
to
like
your
$6,
free
and then you
$11.
get your free.
Yeah,
I know, I was halfway there. I was gonna go beg for it. So, I lost some stuff, but at the end, it just felt like Mission Impossible, and we got the phone back, and she left it on, which I kind of wonder, like after I went on the bus, and I made it a little hot for her to be handling a pink phone and playing around with. Like, she left it on. It's like maybe she was like, well, this is the best I can do for this lady. She has to be smart enough to have GPS on this phone, and then she can get it back. And maybe she did it to be nice. Like, maybe she felt a little bad for what she did.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. That's what makes me feel better.
Yep. And the silver lining of this whole ordeal, you've been feeling better.
I have been.
The morning sickness is not as sick.
Yeah, it's not as intense. It's still there in the evenings. A lot of times I just go to bed because I'm just feeling like sick to my stomach, but it's been a lot better. And then I was out at RTD yesterday, which is not yesterday. The day I was out on Friday.
Okay, I was going to say, if you were at RTD yesterday, I didn't know about it.
I snuck out to see RTD while you were away.
Mm-hmm.
But I was out there again in the morning, so a lot of the conductors and operators kind of had known about my situation because it's a small group of people who operate this one train line for RTD. And so they came in, they were asking me how things were, and I was able to actually tell them, yeah, I got my phone back. It was really great. In the end, it's a good conclusion. And I think, I'd be happy to pay the price that I did to see like the beauty of humanity that emerged toward me in my situation. Like, that was such a gift, and I think I'll forget that gift of how nice the response was from like those 2 gentlemen on the platform. Kind of the weird joy of tracking down my phone and getting it back. That's all really good things that I don't regret.
Yeah. My office heard the whole saga.
I know they did. Kit got our phone back.
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah. Our office manager kept checking on me, seeing how things were going.
It's a dramatic situation. It was very high drama.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are going on, and there's stakes at play, and there's people involved. So.
Yeah. But we got it done.
Yeah, we got it done. So weirdly, I don't know, it's neither a good nor a bad situation in the week. It was like just a dramatic situation in the end that had a net loss, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been by far. Replacing a phone? Ugh.
Well, it's not
all
the phone.
Stuff on the phone.
The phone isn't the hard part.
Yeah.
It's the contacts, and then the bigger...
And stuff is on the cloud, but it's not like everything.
The bigger problem with phones is what most people do with their phones. They have them connected to either Chrome or a password app or something like that. So every single password you have, all your access to everything online, free and clear.
Yeah, that's the freaky part. So we would have wiped it if it were off, for sure.
Yeah, I was like hovering on the little spot. I had exported all your passwords, and I was getting ready to just kill it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to because I realized it was a loop.
Yeah, and it was coming back to where it all started.
Yeah.
A little short, big talk?
Sure.
I'll keep it brief. I kind of have something in mind that's a little shorter because I knew that small talk was going to be like a long small talk.
Uh-huh.
So I thought I would talk about the order of the sacraments of initiation.
Okay.
And so if you reflect wherever you're listening on your own experience when you receive the sacraments of initiation, what it was like. So the sacraments of initiation are the 3 sacraments that bring you into full kind of I guess, initiation, a full family with the church. So it's the sacrament of baptism, which is the entrance to all sacraments. It's the sacrament of confirmation, and then the sacrament of the Eucharist, which is the highest sacrament of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it is in those order. There's an ordinal nature to the sacraments of initiation that begins with baptism. With confirmation, you are stirred up and sealed in the Holy Spirit, and you are strengthened to be like a true Christian. And then, of course, receiving God's body again and again and again in the Eucharist and preparing for that is the final of the three sacraments. But if you think about how you received the sacraments of initiation, a lot of people listening will have received them out of order.
I would say 99.5%.
Yeah, unless you were
received them that way.
Unless you entered the church in RCIA, I would say you probably received them in the correct order if you entered into RCIA.
I don't know. Would you have?
Yes, yeah.
When did that start? I mean, because if we're talking about listeners.
Okay, adults. Like
yeah,
if you were an adult entering.
Yeah, I would say that most adults, because me included, receive the sacraments out of order.
Yeah, in what order?
So I'm a perfect case because my baptism was when I was like 6. And then I received the Eucharist, communion, or no. I received baptism, then reconciliation, then communion, then my confirmation when I was 19.
Yeah, and that's usually like reconciliation is in the mix, and there's a reason for that. Although reconciliation is a sacrament of healing, not a sacrament of initiation. So
Correct.
It's a little different.
Yeah, but I received it before I received communion.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think that's the norm for most parts of the country.
Yes.
So in our diocese and in a dozen other dioceses in the United States of America, the bishops of those dioceses have opted to do something called restoring the order of the sacraments of initiation. So in our diocese now, children who are approaching the age of reason, I'll call it, are able to prepare for confirmation and then First Communion, which happens at the same Mass.
Yeah.
So that's different than the experience of their parents. And so I have a lot of parent questions about why are we receiving confirmation so young?
Right. And the reason you're even talking about this now is because you're in the thick of it as faith formation director at our church.
Well, it's a question that I hear a lot.
It's commonly coming up because none of us were raised that way if we were in the church.
Yeah. So if you want to know, like, how did this, if the sacraments of initiation are ordinal, if it's baptism, confirmation, First Communion, then how did it come to be that I received my sacraments of initiation out of order, that you received your sacraments of initiation out of order? How did that
ordinal,
come?
You're saying because it's
First, second, third.
Right. To go good to best.
Yes. But, and I mean, if you break open the catechism, you're going to see, I don't know, a dozen to 20 different quotes about the sacraments of initiation being in this order. It's explicitly in this order. So baptism, confirmation, First Communion. So what happened? That's the question that I was answering with a presentation a couple weeks ago at one of our family nights.
Well,
so,
as an American, I would expect that it was a bunch of bishops got together and they voted and said, we're going to do it this way. Because that's how I understand democracy to work.
That's how you...
But that's not probably how it worked.
No, it isn't. So for hundreds of years in the church, we saw the sacraments of initiation as your entrance into being a Christian. And, as the centuries passed, we realized, baptism can happen at any time, but we really should connect the sacrament of the Eucharist and the sacrament of confirmation and of reconciliation. All of those sacraments should be connected to the age of reason, when someone can actually prepare themselves for what they're about to enter into. And so for a while, age of reason wasn't defined. So that was up to each church or each diocese to determine whether the age of reason was 7 years old or whether it was 14 years old. Mm-hmm. So that started to coalesce in the 13th century, with the age of reason being kind of between those two ages. Prior to the 13th century, a lot of Catholics received all of their sacraments of initiation as children, as babies, which is what is commonly practiced in the Byzantine rite of the Catholic Church. From what I understand, I haven't been to a Byzantine baptism, but I believe babies receive everything when they're baptized. I think it's like within 10 days of their birth or something. So that's the way it was prior to the 13th century.
Okay.
In the 13th century, there must have been a decree of some kind that said, we need to give reconciliation and Eucharist and confirmation at the age of reason, air quotes. And the age of reason was not defined. So as the centuries passed from the 13th century to the 20th century, it becomes common practice for that age of reason to be more in the teenage years. And that has to do with, like Father Ernest preached a couple of homilies ago about the Eucharist has two natures, and they're both correct. One is that it's a sacrifice, and the other nature is that it's a meal together. And, it's both of those things. And so you need to respect the Eucharist and respect what it is as a sacrifice, but it's also communion with the Lord. And we tend to kind of go between those, like there's some tension, and we tend to gravitate toward one or the other instead of recognizing that it's a duality, or we see it as a duality instead of a union.
Yes.
So when you see and you're overly emphasizing the sacrificial nature of the Eucharist, and you really realize, oh my gosh, like I'm receiving the body of God into me, and there's consequences from that if I'm not receiving him well, then you start to think, well, maybe these kids shouldn't be receiving the Eucharist. Maybe we need to have it out in the 14s and the 15s age when they can really understand what they're receiving. So it became common practice for people to not receive the Eucharist or confirmation of the Eucharist until they were a teenager.
When did that happen? Because I've never heard of that in my life.
This is before 1910.
Okay. So
this is not in living memory.
So back in the day of our great grandparents,
yep,
they would go to church and be a 14-year-old or 13-year-old, and they would have not received the Eucharist.
Yes. And it was much more common practice for people to not approach the altar to receive the Eucharist because of not feeling like they were worthy enough, or they had prepared well enough with the reconciliation.
But in that time period, I mean, that was still pretty risky because you probably might not live that long.
But you were baptized.
Okay, so therefore you were good to go.
Yeah, you were. So baptism makes you a Christian.
Right,
It makes you a part of God's family.
The mystical body of Christ,
so, yeah,
yes.
What they were doing by kind of holding off those sacraments was seen to be, and this is me projecting. I'm not talking to anyone who is like a witness here. I'm looking at documents. They were trying to reverence these sacraments. So they were holding them at such reverence. They wanted to protect the sacraments and then protect us from the consequences of accessing the sacraments inappropriately or in an unprepared way.
You mean they shouldn't be ubiquitous?
What do you mean by that?
Everybody can have it whenever they want it, however they want it,
so again,
as a commodity?
There's a tension in our society between, access to the Eucharist and privilege of access.
Brought to you by the Industrial Revolution.
Yes. So that's a different problem. That's something else. So anyway, centuries pass and we come to Pope Pius X, who is a saint. So he's Saint Pope Pius X in the church. And he realizes, children are not being given the sacraments until they're in their teenager years. Like, this is a very long time for children to wait until the highest sacrament is given to them. So he released a decree quam. Oh gosh, darn it! It's what love is Christ's in Latin. So his decree basically says, hey, for the age of reason is now age 7 years old. So there's no this, cloudy, foggy age of reason that's evaluated child by child. It's the age of 7. And so children should be encouraged to prepare for and receive reconciliation and First Communion. So we shouldn't be withholding these until their teenage years.
So what year was that?
1910.
Okay, so that was 1910 that our Pope laid down the ruling so that everyone would understand and could unify.
So it was a decree, so it meant around the world, again, I presume, I only know what happened in the United States, around the world, the age for reconciliation and First Communion were brought to age 7 because he expressly, dictated those sacraments in this decree. So he said sacrament of reconciliation, sacrament of communion, that needs to start at age 7. He did not expressly say anything about confirmation. And so at least in the United States of America, I don't know if other kind of conferences or however they're organized, did this differently. But here in the good old US of A, that meant that we moved reconciliation and First Communion to age 7. But the age of confirmation remained fixed in the teens, which broke the order of the sacraments of initiation.
That sounds like the obstinance of an American to me.
I mean, it'd be interesting to go back.
Well, no,
when we're in heaven one day, we can ask these guys, like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, but I mean, if we just kind of put on our American hat, we were told to do this one thing, but I'm not going to do that other thing because we've said in our country we're going to do it at this time.
Yeah.
And so we broke the two apart.
And it may be that even at the time that confirmation and First Communion were connected with something else, which is your coming of age. So when you were confirmed later than your baptism, right?
Yes.
How was it kind of described to you when you were confirmed? What did you kind of feel was happening to you in your faith?
Well, I wanted to pursue more of my faith, and so all my friends were apparently confirmed. I'm like, I guess I should do that too. That was
and
basically
then was
it.
there? So what did it make you?
I have no idea, honestly.
Okay.
Aside from the bishop came and sealed me with the oils, I didn't learn a thing.
Well, see, I don't actually remember. I remember my preparation for confirmation, but I can't remember my actual confirmation, which is interesting because you know my brain.
Well, yeah. Well, I remember it, but I was in college, and so.
Oh, that's true.
I had like one meeting with my pastor, and that was about it. And I was supposed to read stuff, and like I'm gonna read. I'm dyslexic. No, didn't happen.
So I'll kind of put some words into maybe a lot of people's mouths that confirmation came to be connected with like you're becoming an adult in the faith. That when you were confirmed, you are now an adult in the faith.
Yes, I've heard that.
It was like your Catholic graduation. That now you could be a lector. Now you could be a Eucharistic minister. Now you could be an usher because you are confirmed now.
Yeah.
So when you're being confirmed as a teenager, when you're also getting your driver's license, when you're also preparing for graduating from high school and whatever's going to follow, all of these coming of age events are occurring in this time of your life. And so confirmation came to be connected with a coming of age.
Yeah.
And some families, I've heard it described that it was then you choosing to be Catholic when you were confirmed, that, your parents made that choice.
Such an American thing to do.
It is. It's very American. So people would describe like baptism was your parents choosing to make you a Catholic, but confirmation is you choosing to become a Catholic. And which doesn't actually, it doesn't reflect the reality of the sacrament that's taking place.
It doesn't it doesn't reflect the reality of our church, of Catholicism at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the moment that you are born again through your baptism, you are part of the body of Christ. So therefore, you're already part of the church.
Yeah.
Sacramentally, and it can't be undone.
Yeah, so it can't be taken away. And what confirmation does is it stirs up the gifts of baptism. It gives you the gifts of, knowledge, piety, wisdom, counsel, fear of the Lord. I'm going to miss a couple. But it gives you those gifts. It endows you with those gifts. And it also strengthens you to actually have the courage to speak out as a Christian person. So we have to believe, if we're Catholics, a Catholic sacrament does something to change us.
Yes.
It cannot be revoked. And so it's not just a graduation ceremony where you throw the tassel from one side of your head to another and you become something new. Like it changes you fundamentally, and it still is a mark that cannot be removed.
Yes.
You can't ever say, I'm unconfirmed now. You can't deny actually that you're confirmed later on. I mean, you can say it with words, but you can't remove that mark.
No, you cannot.
Ever. So, depending on where you live in this country and when confirmation occurs, I just wanted to explain, why confirmation is out of order, because it's not very well known. And even when we were restoring the order of the sacraments, I had it explained incorrectly to me. And someone said, well, they waited for confirmation because a bishop has to be involved in confirmation. It was just logistically hard to bring the bishop around all the children, at such a young age, which actually doesn't make a lot of sense because there's going to be the same population of children hopefully getting confirmed, as there are receiving First Communion.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding about what happened to the Order of the Sacraments, and I personally think the restored order in our diocese has been a really good thing, because we should get these kids fully sacramentalized as early as possible to face this world. And as our Archbishop stated it when he brought the restored order here, he wanted to make sure that our goal as a body of Christ is to make people saints, to make more saints.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way.
It is the way. And I think the one piece that we're still trying to find out how to do well as a diocese, because I think, over almost 100 years of this method, when you get to your confirmation, it's like, great, good job. Now go do something. And even as adults, when we received confirmation, it's like, okay, I don't know what to do.
Now the onus is on you. It's the way it's kind of
it feels. So now, at least within our diocese, if we are taking these children and we are leading them to confirmation, they are sealed and they are ready to be witnesses to Christianity. How do we fulfill that, form them, and get them ready? Just like in the early church, you didn't just go out after receiving these things and be like, oh yeah, let me just witness to the Lord. I'm ready to be a martyr. Well, they probably did, but we don't talk about that at all. We don't help them to know, okay, now that this has happened, let's build your relationship with Christ further so that you can be ready to be a martyr when the time comes, in whatever form that is.
So confirming a third grader changes the way that we have to talk about what happens after confirmation.
Yeah.
So when you're confirming a teenager, a lot of times what seems to happen is that's the end of the line. That's the where you can stop your journey. You've fulfilled everything. Mm-hmm. You've gotten to the apex. Therefore, nothing else to do.
Which is ridiculous, but
it is. But when you confirm as a third grader, I think I'm talking to parents and they're like, okay, so we're confirmed, then nothing else happens, because that was their experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to re-educate our entire church body that we are on a journey, and a journey, it persists through middle school, high school, college, whatever the heck you do, through work into retirement. Mm-hmm. That journey continues.
Well, because when you receive your confirmation, that's day one. That's the beginning.
It is,
not
in
the
a way.
end.
Yes,
and that's where it's been misconstrued.
Yes. And so that's a lot of the education that I'm doing with families, because when we announced the restored order in 2015 and we had a deadline of 2020, our church was pretty quick. We were restored by 2017.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much education in the beginning, and that has fallen away. So we have a lot of people whose children in my program were toddlers when the restored order was announced.
Yes.
They weren't paying attention to what was happening sacramentally for children in grade school. They were paying attention to toddlers. And therefore they've come to this point in their child's life and they're like, why are we confirming now? Because this is it then. There's nothing for them to do in high school. It's so different from my experience of the faith and all the things that I did on confirmation retreat. Because they experienced confirmation in a rich way, with the intellectual ability to really get, to dig in on what was about to happen to them, which that is an argument that's made against the restored order, that there's, a participation in the sacrament that a child can't have at their age compared to a child at an older age.
Yeah, I get that, but I would, as I'm sure the counter to that is they're teenagers and they don't care anyways. Oh. They're doing their own thing. They're halfway into the secular world, if not fully into the secular world, because we all went to public school where we were indoctrinated into not Christ. So by the time you get to age 18 and you're going through confirmation, you're like, cool, now I don't have to go to church anymore. Thank God. That's what most teenagers are thinking. There are some exceptions to that are being called fully to the Lord. But most of us, by that time, we had so much of what the world tells you should be doing, which is getting ready to go off to college and forgetting everything else and living your life. That I don't think, at least in my experience, I don't think a lot of teenagers get anything out of confirmation by that point, because it's too late. you know?
That's an interesting point. And that's a good counter argument to the arguments that I've heard that like it isn't good to do the restored order of the sacraments. When you go online and you're, on different Catholic websites, like any website with a comment section, people have strong opinions. And some of those strong opinions can be well formed. And I told my families this, it doesn't actually matter what you personally feel about the restored order. It doesn't matter what you personally feel about your child being confirmed now, because our archbishop says this is, make it so.
Yes, and we have obedience to our bishop.
Yeah, so he has the authority to make this change, and he's made that change. And it is what it is. So whether you like it or not, this is the way it's going to be. Whether you think it's better to confirm later when a child's brain is like ready to grasp onto higher level subjects, counter is exactly what you just said, that it's too late for them. Or if you, do kind of say, like on my feeling of the restored order is like, we should give the sacraments to these kids now. Because they're going to be strengthened by them, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, so it's like a nutritional regimen. If you give them the nutrition now, then they are strengthened for the battles to come. But if you just give it as like a vaccine at the end, and then they go out into the world but don't understand what it does for them, they're like most of us. They go on a 10, 15, 20-year roundabout of outside of the church, and then realize
a walkabout.
Yes, a walkabout.
Nice.
An unfortunate walkabout, not a true walkabout, because a true walkabout really helps you to find yourself. These walkabouts lead you completely astray, and then you're coming back, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and when you finally realize the truth of the lie that's been happening to you for so long, and you come back to the church and you come back to Christ fully. So the only thing that it's done, and that's the reason I use, as a vaccination, it's guarded you against complete loss of yourself, that there's a way home. And not that Christ isn't going to pull people home the way he wants them to. He's going to rescue them when he wants to rescue them. But
as long as they cooperate.
It's
a two-way path.
That by being sealed, fully sealed with the Holy Spirit, then you have a much better chance of coming back.
Yeah.
Rather than the other way, which would be you are fully formed, you receive it, it is nurtured, you understand what it does, and then you go do it.
Yeah. And this kind of relates to when you were sharing after your conference, the discussion was like, how do we engage the youth? And there was a section, I think we should probably wrap up here. I can't believe we're almost at 50 minutes. I thought this would be a short, big talk.
I mean, we're an episode behind, so.
I guess so. This is standing in the place of 2. I still think it's going long. But when Pope St. Pius X released that decree, there was like a third component, which was putting the onus on families to make sure that their children continued to persevere in the sacraments.
Yes.
That was explicitly stated.
He did.
Which describes what part of the church?
The domestic church.
Yes.
Yes. So I guess what I would suspect had happened at that time, because we're talking 1910 when this was happening, public schools were just starting to come online. It wasn't a thing yet. It was still at the home. You were teaching the kids, and they would be formed and then go out and work in the fields, or they were starting to move into the cities. But your major education was done by the parent. In come John Dewey and all the other crazy people that brought us the public school system. Bless you. And now we have changed our mode of how we deal with our children, right? Our children are taught by an educational system. I don't teach my kids. That's what the school does.
Well, we're made to feel inept.
Yes, we are.
Can't possibly teach our children.
Right. So now the domestic church, where those lessons should be learned, has lost its chops. We don't know how to do it. And so even now, for you as a faith formation director, you have all these parents that are coming in saying, cool, teach my kid. I don't know what to do because I don't know how to teach, which is not true. Every parent teaches every moment that they have a child. But we feel that we don't know how. And that's brought to us by the public education system that has taken away the authority of the parent to teach their children the lessons and inheritance of their generation.
Yeah, so the ideal response to this suddenly realizing, like, oh my gosh, I have more responsibility now with the restored order. And even before, like if your child is receiving First Communion, you have the same responsibility. Your, ideal response is that you start really engaging in the faith for your own self, knowing that you're still on the journey, and then you bring your family along that journey with you. That's the ideal response. But I'd say the realistic response is that a lot of families continue to need the church to do the leading on their kids.
Yeah.
And for that, we do have programming all the way through and beyond high school at almost every church. So it means that, instead of, confirmation, we're done, it ought to be, let's go back. We are confirmed. Let's see what else is going on.
Yeah.
Because there's program that is still happening. Again, it's best if the whole family is on that journey, but at least, if the kids can get brought back to church a little bit, it's getting into them. Although it doesn't matter nearly as much as the domestic church that they might be missing at home.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a good talk.
It was.
Yeah.
You learned something.
I did.
I didn't realize that you had not heard this whole spiel with all the talks and preparation and stuff I've been doing.
Well, I've been listening to it, but half of it I had to walk out of the room because of our youngest having to do things. So I didn't quite catch all of that. It's very interesting, and I've enjoyed being a part of the different teacher aspects of faith formation, because it's been teaching me and also keeping me involved with what my children are doing and learning. So
actually, that's a good shout out to go volunteer at your church in the faith formation program, because it will form your faith. It will refresh your own understanding of the fundamentals when you go back to teach. And children especially, maybe it's a little harder for teenagers, but teaching children, they don't ask the big aha gotcha questions. And they do see you as knowing everything. And that's what curriculum's for. The curriculum gives you everything that you need to teach. And so it's going to teach you as it's teaching these kids.
Yep. Yeah. Until you get to the middle school kids, and then they start asking completely random questions.
You need to be ready when you get to middle school and high schoolers. Middle schoolers probably especially. Yeah,
start with the youngins and work your way up to the middle schoolers, because they keep getting me.
Gotchas.
That's right. Well, if you have any thoughts on this subject or want to let us know how you guys are doing it in your diocese, let us know. CatholicHitch@gmail.com.
May the Lord guide and direct our journey.
Amen.
It's our longest podcast ever.
I think so.
Sorry.